There is just one problem. The local data is wrong. The expansion rate is 73. The deviation is 6 sigma. The discrepancy is impossible. The model collapses instantly. You look up at the night sky, and you assume you are seeing an objective truth. You think the darkness between the stars is just a passive theater. You believe the laws of physics are the same everywhere. But what if the space you are looking through has been hollowed out? We are going to examine the precise coordinates of our solar system. We are going to look at the density surveys of the KBC anomaly. By the time we measure the outflow velocity of the galaxies fleeing from our position, you will understand that you are not standing on a vantage point. You are standing in a quarantine zone. To understand the scale of this illusion, we have to examine the second ruler we used to measure the cosmos. We built the Hubble Space Telescope to calculate the expansion of the universe right now in our immediate cosmic neighborhood. We use Cepheid variable stars to determine exact astronomical distances. These are massive, pulsating stars. They swell and shrink. They grow brighter and dimmer in a perfectly predictable rhythm. We measure the time it takes for one complete pulse. We use that period to determine their true intrinsic luminosity. We compare that absolute brightness to how dim they appear in our lenses on Earth. We use this inverse square law of light to build a cosmic distance ladder. We measure the redshift of the galaxies containing these Cepheids. We calculate exactly how fast they are receding from us. In 2024, astrophysicist Adam Rees and his team analyzed the definitive dataset. The local universe is expanding at 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec. We thought Hubble might have a calibration error. We pointed the James Webb Space Telescope at the exact same Cepheid variables. Webb operates in the near-infrared spectrum. It pierces through the interstellar dust that might obscure Hubble's optical sensors. Webb delivered its raw data. The measurements were identical. We calibrated the lenses. We accounted for cosmic dust. We minimized the margin of error to a fraction of a percent. We established a hard, physical fact. The two numbers do not match. 67, 73. They are completely incompatible. A 6 sigma deviation. The chance is 1 in a billion. The equipment is flawless. The mathematics is perfect. The error is 0. The two ends of reality do not connect. Space is lying. Here is where it stops being an astronomical curiosity and starts being something deeply unsettling. Think about what this actually means for your physical surroundings. Imagine you are standing in your living room holding a metal tape measure. You want to measure the exact distance from the front window to the back wall. You pull the steel tape from left to right. You read the numbers. The room is exactly 5 meters across. You record the data. You are satisfied. Then you walk to the opposite wall. You pull the exact same tape measure from right to left. You look at the metal strip. The room is now 6 meters across. You check the tape. The metal is intact. The markings are correct. You have not made a mistake. You stare at the empty space between the walls. The air feels heavy. The silence gets louder. You realize the terrifying truth of your situation. Think about the psychological devastation of that fact. The cosmological principle was the bedrock of human sanity. It was the silent agreement we made with the terrifying vastness of the cosmos. It stated that we are not in a special place. It promised that the universe is homogeneous and isotropic. It guaranteed that the physics we observe in our telescopes on Earth is the exact same physics that governs the farthest, darkest reaches of reality. That principle was our safety net. It allowed us to sleep at night. It allowed us to believe we were deciphering the master code of existence. But if the expansion rate is drastically different here, in our immediate vicinity, than it is in the ancient cosmic background, that safety net dissolves. It means the laws of physics are not a universal constitution. They are regional bylaws. You have to start looking at the universe not as a pristine laboratory, but as a compromised crime scene. In criminology, when a detective walks into a locked room and finds two pieces of evidence that mathematically contradict each other, a pool of liquid water on the floor, but perfectly dry, freezing air in the ventilation system, they do not assume the laws of thermodynamics have stopped working. They assume the scene has been artificially manipulated. They assume they are being lied to by the environment. We are currently looking at two perfect numbers, 67, 73. A 6 sigma deviation means there is less than a 1 in 500 million chance that this is a statistical fluke. It is a hard, physical certainty. They cannot both be the universal baseline. And since our instruments have been calibrated to perfection, the only remaining conclusion is that our local environment is a fabricated stage. The space surrounding our solar system is warped. It is infected with a localized anomaly that artificially accelerates the recession of nearby galaxies. We have spent our entire history trying to understand the cosmos by looking through a single window. We mapped the constellations. We tracked the orbital velocities of distant quasars. We wrote thousands of peer-reviewed papers about the dark energy that is supposedly tearing the fabric of space-time apart. But we never stop to inspect the glass of the window itself. What if the glass is fundamentally distorted? What if the lens through which we view the entirety of existence is tainted by the specific geography of where we are standing? If the fundamental forces of nature act differently in our local vicinity, then everything we think we know about the universe is nothing more than a regional bias. You are not learning the objective truth of reality. You are only mapping the contours of your immediate confinement. This discrepancy is tearing astrophysics apart because it suggests a terrifying isolation. If our local sector of space is expanding faster, it means something is physically pulling on it. It means there is a localized gravitational or structural influence acting upon our neighborhood that is not acting upon the rest of the universe. We are being subjected to a force that the rest of the cosmos is immune to. It isolates us. It makes our patch of space a statistical freak. And anomalies of this scale do not just happen quietly in the dark. They are usually symptoms of a violent, underlying structure that we cannot yet see. We are trapped in a pocket of space that refuses to obey the rules of the whole. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. If the universe isn't expanding uniformly, what is pulling on us? The math isn't broken. The space you are sitting in is lying to you. The discrepancy was just a symptom. The real disease was discovered when we stopped looking at the edge of the universe and started looking at our own neighborhood. In 2013, astronomers Ryan Keenan, Amy Barger, and Lennox Cowie analyzed this extensive redshift data from the local universe. They discovered a massive, continuous, structural anomaly encompassing our entire solar system. We named it the KBC void. It is a roughly spherical, contiguous region of space, with a radius of approximately 1 billion light-years. That makes it 2 billion light-years in diameter. It is one of the largest structures ever identified in the observable universe. We continued to gather data to verify its density profile. In 2024, an international team of astrophysicists, led by Moritz Haselbauer, published a comprehensive, peer-reviewed analysis in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. They cross-referenced the local galactic density catalogues with the standard cosmological models derived from the cosmic microwave background. They quantified the exact mass distribution of the KBC anomaly. The data was processed, the results were confirmed. This 2 billion light-year sphere surrounding Earth is severely underdense. It contains 20% less matter than the established cosmic average. We quantified the physical deficit: 20% of the expected galaxies, 20% of the dark matter mass, and 20% of the structural scaffolding are completely missing from our region of the universe. We confirmed the measurements across multiple surveys. We published the findings. We established the physical parameters of our local environment. We verified the emptiness. Here is the problem. The cosmological principle is dead. The foundation is gone. The universe is not uniform. It is not identical everywhere. The math demands an even distribution. The data shows a massive crater. We are standing in that crater. 20% of reality is gone. It is missing. The mass is nowhere. The standard model collapses. The rules do not apply. What that means is that your perception of reality has been entirely fabricated by your immediate surroundings. You look up at the Milky Way, stretching across the night sky. You see billions of glowing stars, nebulae, and planetary systems. You think you live in a thriving, bustling metropolis of cosmic architecture. You think this abundance of light and matter is the baseline of existence. You assume the rest of reality looks exactly like this, stretching infinitely into the dark. But you are suffering from a profound, localized optical illusion. You are judging the scale of the ocean by staring at a single drop of water inside a bucket. Let's strip away the astronomical jargon and look at this as a physical space. Imagine you fall asleep in a normal house in the middle of a sprawling metropolis. You wake up the next morning. You look out your bedroom window and see the neighbor's house, the manicured lawn, the street lamp on the corner. It all looks perfectly normal. You assume you are still in the middle of a densely populated city. You assume there are millions of people living their lives, driving cars, and walking on concrete just beyond your line of sight. You feel secure in the continuity of your environment. But then you walk to the front door. You turn the heavy brass handle. You push the door open and step outside. Your house is not in a city. Your house, your neighbor's house, and the street lamp are sitting in the exact center of a barren, terrifyingly empty wasteland stretching for thousands of miles in every direction. The entire city has been systematically removed. The skyscrapers are gone. The asphalt is missing. 20% of the concrete, the steel, the soil, and the biomass have been erased without a single trace. There is no debris field. There is no rubble to indicate a natural disaster. A hurricane or an earthquake leaves ruins. Nature is messy. Nature leaves scars. But this space is perfectly clean. It was meticulously cleared out. The matter did not just drift away by chance. It was excised. And you are sitting exactly in the middle of the excavation site. You begin to realize that the presence of your house is the anomaly. You are not part of a functioning society. You are a remnant left behind in a void. When a crime scene investigator walks into a room where 20% of the physical evidence is simply missing, they do not write it off as a natural phenomenon. They look for the mechanism of removal. They look for the entity that sanitized the room. But when astrophysicists look at the KBC void, they do not run. They write equations. They measure the density parameters. They document the missing mass with a cold, clinical detachment. They hide the absolute horror of our geometry behind the comforting Greek letters of the lambda CDM model. Because facing the reality of this void requires admitting something catastrophic about our place in the cosmos. For centuries, we have comforted ourselves with the Copernican principle. It is the philosophical offspring of the cosmological principle. It tells us that humanity is not privileged. We are not special. We are just an average species, living on an average rocky planet, orbiting an average yellow dwarf star, drifting in an average spiral arm of an average galaxy. It is a humbling thought, but it is also a profoundly comforting one. If we are perfectly average, it means we belong to the collective fabric of the universe. It means the physical laws that protect us here are enforced everywhere else. It means we are safe. The KBC void shatters that comfort. You are not average. You are existing inside a statistical freak of nature. If 20% of the expected matter is missing, it means the gravitational bonds that hold our local neighborhood together are fundamentally weaker than the rest of reality. We are sitting inside a fragile, low-density bubble. The structural integrity of our sky is compromised. You look at the stars at night, and you see a permanent, unyielding canopy. But the truth is that the floor beneath us is hollow. We are living on the cosmic equivalent of a frozen lake, where the ice is 20% thinner than the surrounding glacier. And we have built our entire civilization on this fragile, cracking surface, completely oblivious to the dark, freezing water waiting underneath. This changes how you must interpret every image ever captured by a telescope. When you see those beautiful, vibrant pictures of distant galaxy clusters taken by Hubble or James Webb, you are not looking at your neighbors. You are looking at the outside world through the thick, distorting glass of a quarantine cell. Those galaxies belong to the normal universe. They exist in the high-density reality where the laws of physics operate exactly as intended. We do not. We are isolated in the underdense zone. We are the anomaly. Why would a specific, highly spherical sector of the universe be systematically drained of its mass? Nature abhors a vacuum. Gravity is designed to pull things together. It is designed to create dense, thriving webs of matter. Gravity does not carve out perfect 2 billion light-year spheres of nothingness. Gravity builds. It does not excavate. If natural cosmic evolution did not clear this space, you are forced to consider the alternative. The empty space is a design. The lack of matter is a functional requirement. In criminology, you do not empty a room unless you are trying to isolate whatever is left inside it. You remove the furniture, the objects, the variables, so you can control the environment. You create a void to prevent the subject from interacting with the outside world. We have spent our entire existence transmitting radio signals into the dark, hoping someone is listening. We sent the Voyager probes into the interstellar medium, carrying golden records with our coordinates, our music, our greetings. We assumed we were speaking to a crowded room. We assumed we were part of a galactic community just waiting to be discovered. We did not realize we were shouting into an empty ward. The silence we hear from the cosmos is not the silence of distance. It is the silence of an artificially cleared perimeter. The physical matter that should have hosted neighboring civilizations was removed long before we ever evolved. The stars that should have guided them to us do not exist. We are alone because the medium required for company has been systematically erased. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. Why is our part of the cosmos so unnervingly empty? We are not in a bustling cosmic city. We are standing in a graveyard. But a void doesn't just sit there. An emptiness of this scale exerts a very specific, very violent kind of force. In 2024, theoretical physicist Leandros Perivolaropoulos and his colleagues analyzed this massive dataset of peculiar velocities. They published their peer-reviewed findings in Physical Review D and the Oxford Academic Journals. They were looking for the kinematic signature of the KBC void. They wanted to see how the missing 20% of mass was affecting the local gravitational field. They applied a Newtonian gravitational potential model to the spherical underdensity. They calculated the exact force exerted by the high-density walls of matter forming the boundary of the void. They quantified the outflow velocities. The data revealed a massive, systematic bulk flow. The galaxies surrounding the Milky Way are experiencing an outward acceleration. The immense gravitational pull from the dense matter at the edge of the void is actively dragging the internal matter outward. The local expansion is a localized illusion. The Hubble tension is a misinterpretation of the data. The number 73 is not dark energy, it is gravity. The universe is not tearing itself apart faster in our neighborhood. The local space is simply emptying itself out. The galaxies are falling toward the walls. The background expansion remains at a stable 67. The anomaly is just a kinematic symptom of the void. The cosmological mystery is solved. The reality is much worse. Here is where it stops being orbital mechanics and starts being something deeply disturbing. You have been taught that the universe is a balloon, inflating uniformly. You picture the galaxies as dots drawn on the rubber. As the balloon expands, the dots move away from each other. It is a peaceful, symmetrical process. Everyone is moving away from everyone else equally. It is a comforting thought, because it implies a shared, universal experience. But the peculiar velocity data from the cosmic flows surveys proves that the balloon analogy is a complete fabrication for our sector of space. We are not experiencing a gentle, uniform expansion. We are caught in a mechanical purge. Imagine dropping a single drop of black ink into the exact center of an industrial laboratory centrifuge. You close the heavy steel lid, you turn the machine on. The drum spins up to 10,000 revolutions per minute. The centrifugal force takes over instantly. The ink does not gently expand into a larger, perfectly round circle. It is violently ripped away from the center. It is forced outward, plastered against the cold steel walls of the spinning drum. The center becomes completely, aggressively empty. When you look at the galaxies rushing away from the Milky Way at 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec, you are not watching the majestic expansion of space-time. You are watching the ink hitting the centrifuge. You are watching a violent, systematic evacuation of mass. Every star system, every gas cloud, every neighboring galaxy within our local volume is being physically dragged away from our coordinates. They are not drifting on the tide of dark energy. They are caught in an aggressive outflow current, accelerating toward the safety of the high-density boundary walls 2 billion light-years away. You have to look at the vectors. You have to look at the sheer speed of the departure. Now take that exact same kinematic behavior and apply it to the largest structures in the observable universe. We are looking at thousands of massive galaxies, containing trillions of stars, acting exactly like that terrified crowd. They are abandoning our sector of space. They are accelerating toward the high-density walls of the KBC void. They are putting distance between themselves and the core. And what is located at the exact core of this massive evacuation? This completely destroys the romantic, comforting idea of cosmic fellowship. We have spent decades dreaming of the day we might build faster-than-light engines and travel to distant star systems. We write science fiction stories about joining a sprawling galactic community. We imagine that the universe is a vast ocean of opportunity, and we are just waiting to build a boat capable of crossing it. We look at the glowing lights of neighboring galaxies and think of them as destinations. We think of them as our peers, but you are misinterpreting the evidence. Those glowing lights are not welcoming beacons. They are tail lights. You are watching the exhaust of a fleeing cosmos. You are watching the last ships leave a harbor that has been condemned. The evacuation did not start yesterday. It has been happening for billions of years. By the time human consciousness finally evolved enough to build a telescope and look up at the sky, the mass exodus was already nearing its completion. The local group, the small cluster of galaxies containing our Milky Way and Andromeda, is caught in the center of this dead zone, isolated by a staggering distance from the retreating walls of matter. The matter that was supposed to be here, the matter that should have formed a dense, thriving web of gravitational interaction, is already gone. In criminology, when you find a heavily fortified room where everything inside has been systematically pushed to the extreme outer edges, pressed flat against the walls, you have to conclude one of two things. Either the authorities cleared the center to contain a biohazard, or there is an active explosive device sitting in the middle of the floor, and the room was evacuated to minimize the blast radius. Either way, the center of the room is the absolute worst place you could possibly be standing, and that is our address. We are standing at the epicenter of a 2 billion light-year dead zone. We are the anomaly that the rest of reality is actively trying to distance itself from. We assume that gravity is the universal glue. We assume it brings things together. But inside the KBC void, the gravity is inverted by the sheer absence of local mass. The high-density walls at the boundary are pulling everything outward, ripping the local cosmic web to shreds. It means that the fundamental structure of our reality is inherently hostile to our continued existence. The universe is not trying to nurture us. It is actively trying to strand us. It is physically removing the scaffolding around us, leaving our solar system floating in a solitary confinement cell that is growing larger and emptier by the second. Think about the psychological weight of that isolation. Every time you look through a telescope at the distant universe, you are not looking at a shared reality. You are looking at the barricade. You are looking at the wall of matter that surrounds our quarantine zone. We are trapped on the inside of a sphere that has been drained of its resources. We are not explorers standing on the shores of a cosmic ocean. We are patients, locked inside an empty ward, watching through a thick pane of glass as the doctors turn off the lights and walk away. If every physical object with mass is being violently dragged away from our local coordinates, you have to ask yourself what triggered the outflow. A void of this magnitude does not just happen passively. It is a reaction. The rest of the universe is reacting to our exact location in space. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. What is in this sector of space that everything else is terrified of? The universe isn't expanding away from us. It is fleeing. Once you realize the room is rigged, you have to question every measurement you've ever made inside it. Here is the kicker. The baseline is contaminated. The starting point is a lie. Every local measurement is infected. We assumed the sensors were slightly off. They were not. The equipment is flawless. The space itself is broken. We built the standard model from inside a crater. We took the physics of a damaged room. We called it a universal law. The laws are fake. The foundation is warped. Nothing is uniform. The entire model shatters. What that implies is an absolute nightmare for human epistemology. We look out at the deep cosmos, billions of light years away, and we try to decode its mechanics using the mathematical rulebook we wrote right here in the local zone. We assume gravity operates the exact same way at the edge of the observable universe, because that is how it operates in our solar system. We assume quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, and the speed of light are universal constants binding all of creation together. But our rulebook was written inside a 2 billion light-year, underdense anomaly. You are trusting the physics of a localized distortion. You are using the biology of a cage to explain the ecosystem of a jungle. Think about the horrifying implications of that blind spot. Imagine a veteran crime scene investigator walking into a brutally violent murder scene. The room is a chaotic mess of evidence. They need to analyze the blood spatter on the drywall to determine the exact weapon used and the height of the attacker. They pull out their forensic magnifying glass. They strap on their protective, high-contrast goggles. They meticulously measure the geometry of every single droplet. They calculate the terminal velocity, the angle of impact, the surface tension of the fluid. They write a flawless, mathematically perfect 50-page report on exactly how the event unfolded. The math is absolute. It is unassailable. But the investigator does not know one crucial detail. Before they ever walked into the room, someone sprayed a microscopic, undetectable layer of red tint over the inside lenses of their protective goggles. Every drop of water on the wall looks like blood. Every shadow looks like physical evidence. The investigators' math is completely perfect, but their conclusions are entirely fabricated. Their primary instrument of observation is actively feeding them a manufactured reality. The KBC void is that tinted lens. It is a microscopic layer of physical distortion sprayed across every single telescope, every satellite, and every human retina on Earth. We are the investigator, trapped in the room, meticulously analyzing the geometry of a lie. We write dense textbooks about dark energy. We give out Nobel Prizes for measuring the expansion rate of the universe. We build multi-billion-dollar particle accelerators underground to map the fundamental forces. But all of that data, every single photon that has ever touched a human eye or an optical sensor, has been filtered through the specific, warped physics of the z less than 0.15 boundary. If the laws of physics themselves are inhomogeneous, if they literally change depending on where you are standing, then we know absolutely nothing about the true universe. We are looking at a fundamentally alien reality through a lens heavily painted with local defects, and we are arrogant enough to think we are seeing the truth. Every theory about how the universe will end, every calculation about the mass of dark matter, every assumption about the habitability of distant exoplanets is based on the data we collected while wearing those tinted goggles. But what if the cosmos was not calibrated for us at all? What if these perfectly balanced laws of physics do not exist out there in the dark? What if they only exist right here, strictly within the boundaries of the KBC anomaly? Think about the horrifying implications for your own physical body. You are a biological machine built out of local atoms, governed by local quantum mechanics, held together by a local gravitational constant. If the fundamental forces of nature are drastically different beyond the 2 billion light-year perimeter, it means you are completely incompatible with the actual universe. You are an organism uniquely adapted to survive only inside a highly specific, localized defect. Imagine a highly virulent, mutated pathogen locked inside a pressurized, climate-controlled biocontainment cell deep underground. Over millions of years, the pathogen develops a primitive consciousness. It looks around its sterile, stainless steel prison. It meticulously measures the precise ambient humidity. It calculates the wavelength of the artificial ultraviolet lighting. It measures the steady flow of the filtered oxygen. It develops an entire system of mathematics and physics based entirely on its environment. It concludes, with absolute scientific certainty, that the entire universe is exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit, softly lit, and perfectly silent. It believes it has deciphered the grand design. It believes it is the master of reality. It does not know that if the heavy steel door were to ever swing open, the true environment of the outside world, the freezing snow, the scorching sun, the crushing atmospheric pressure would obliterate its cellular structure in a fraction of a second. The pathogen only exists because the containment cell artificially shelters it from the brutal, incompatible reality of the true Earth. We are the pathogen in the steel room. We are completely reliant on the artificial, distorted physics of our localized void. If we ever manage to build an interstellar ship capable of traversing the vast, terrifying emptiness of the KBC anomaly, if we ever manage to pierce the mathematical boundary wall of redshift 0.15, we would not be greeted by a glorious, welcoming cosmos. The moment we crossed the threshold into the normal, high-density universe, the true, unvarnished laws of physics would violently assert themselves. The external gravity might be exponentially more crushing. The external quantum fields might operate on a violently different, chaotic frequency. The thermodynamic baseline might be fundamentally lethal to carbon-based life. Our ships, our atomic structure, the very electrical impulses firing in our brains would be instantly rendered obsolete by a reality we were never meant to touch. We would dissolve the moment we left the cage. We cannot explore the universe because the true universe is toxic to our localized existence. We are a glitch. We are a localized error, allowed to exist only within the specific, distorted parameters of a temporary containment field. We are not the masters of the cosmos. We are a localized contamination that the universe has successfully quarantined. Every time you look up at the night sky, you are not looking at infinity. You are looking at the inner walls of the Petri dish. You are seeing the absolute physical limits of your own biological compatibility. You are trapped in an environment that is actively deceiving you about the nature of existence. And you are completely, desperately dependent on that deception to stay alive. The illusion is the only thing keeping your atoms stitched together. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. How much of our physics is just the biology of a cage? You are not observing reality. You are observing the quarantine. And the deeper we look into this quarantine, the more we realize how thick the glass really is. We map the historical expansion of the universe using a phenomenon called baryon acoustic oscillations. In the first 400,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe was a blindingly hot, dense plasma of interacting photons and baryons. The intense gravitational pull of dark matter tried to compress this plasma, while the immense radiation pressure of the photons pushed it outward. This epic thermodynamic tug-of-war created massive, spherical sound waves rippling through the early cosmos at more than half the speed of light. When the universe finally cooled enough for the first neutral atoms to form, these acoustic waves froze perfectly in place. They left a permanent, measurable imprint on the distribution of matter. We call this a standard ruler. We calculate the exact physical distance between these frozen crests to be approximately approximately 150 megaparsecs, or nearly 500 million light-years. We use immense telescopes, like the Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument, to look deep into the cosmic web. We map the three-dimensional coordinates of tens of millions of galaxies. We analyze the statistical clustering of these galaxies to find the subtle, underlying pattern of these ancient acoustic peaks. We compare the apparent angular size of these ripples at different cosmological epochs to calculate the precise geometry of space. We trust this method completely. It is independent of the local supernova data. It is our ultimate, uncorrupted yardstick for measuring the true scale of existence. We also built the James Webb Space Telescope with a primary mirror 6.5 meters across, coated in a microscopic layer of pure gold to maximize infrared reflectivity. We cool the mid-infrared instrument down to minus 266 degrees Celsius to prevent the telescope's own mechanical heat from blinding its sensors. We capture photons that have been traveling undisturbed through the freezing vacuum for over 13 billion years We assume these photons are pristine messengers. We assume they have maintained their exact structural integrity since the moment they were emitted by the first generation of stars. In 2025, physicist Leandros Perivoloropoulos analyzed the latest baryon acoustic oscillation data across multiple redshift bins. He applied the kinematic parameters of the KBC anomaly to the propagating light. He evaluated the gravitational potential of the underdensity. According to general relativity, when a photon travels through a region of space with a drastically different gravitational mass, it experiences a phenomenon known as gravitational redshift. To climb out of a deep gravitational well, a photon must expend energy, which stretches its wavelength toward the red end of the spectrum. Conversely, when ancient starlight from the distant, high-density universe plunges into our massive, low-density void, its energy state is violently altered by the stark transition in the local gravitational field. Perivoloropoulos confirmed that the empirical BAO data perfectly aligns with the mathematical profile of the void, completely contradicting the flat, uniform predictions of the standard model. We documented the gravitational redshift. We verified the structural alteration of the photons. Here is the problem. The light is corrupted. The images are physically warped. The ancient photons are compromised. The incoming data is a distortion. We are measuring the bend. We are calculating the optical flaw. The telescope is perfect. The space is entirely defective. What that means is that the breathtaking images of the deep cosmos you see on your screens are not objective reality. They are technical truths, but they are optical lies. The James Webb Space Telescope is functioning exactly as engineered. It is capturing real photons. But those photons have been dragged through a 2 billion light-year gauntlet of inverted physics. By the time that ancient light reaches our optical sensors, it has been stretched, pulled, and fundamentally disfigured by the quarantine zone we live in. We are entirely blind to what the universe actually looks like in its native, undisturbed state. Think about the sensory horror of that realization. You rely on your vision to establish the truth of your environment. You believe that seeing is believing. Imagine going to an abandoned amusement park in the dead of night. You walk into the crumbling remains of a hall of mirrors. You stand in the exact center of the pitch-black room. You turn on a small flashlight. You look at the glass surrounding you. The funhouse mirrors are designed with aggressive convex and concave curves. They stretch your reflection until you look like a towering, emaciated ghost. They compress your image until you look like a crushed, dense sphere of flesh. You see monstrous, mathematically impossible shapes moving in the glass. If you were born inside that hall of mirrors, and you had never once stepped outside into the normal world, you would write entire encyclopedias about the biology of the monsters in the glass. You would write dense, peer-reviewed papers about the biomechanics of these deformed entities. You would establish an entire branch of physics dedicated to understanding how they move and operate in the dark. You would never realize that the monsters do not exist. You would never understand that you are just looking at a perfectly normal reality that has been violently warped by the specific curvature of the glass. The KBC void is the glass. It is a 2 billion light-year thick optical defect. We take that damaged photon. We feed its corrupted wavelength into our supercomputers. We analyze the damage. We call it reality. We are blind. We have always been blind. We have simply invented a very sophisticated branch of mathematics to describe the specific texture of our blindness. Imagine putting on a pair of thick prescription glasses designed for someone with severe, crippling astigmatism. You look at a perfectly round tennis ball sitting on a table. Through the warped lenses, the ball looks like a stretched, jagged, unstable oval. If you were forced to wear those glasses from the moment you were born, you would never know the ball was round. You would eventually assume that jagged and oval is the natural, fundamental state of the object. You would write a brilliant, peer-reviewed thesis on the aerodynamic properties of a jagged oval. You would build complex physics engines to simulate how jagged ovals bounce. That is exactly what human cosmology is right now. We are writing incredibly detailed, Nobel-winning dissertations on the shape of a compromised reflection. And if the incoming light is physically distorted by the gravitational boundary of our quarantine zone, it implies an active, terrifying severance. It means the universe is not just physically isolating us by clearing out the local matter, it is optically isolating us. It is ensuring that we cannot even accurately observe the normal reality outside our perimeter. We are not allowed to touch the outside world, and we are not permitted to see it clearly. The stars you see are an interpretation. The galaxies you map are a gravitational hallucination. You are sitting in the dark, watching a distorted shadow play projected against the curved, defective wall of a 2 billion light-year containment cell. You think you are a brilliant astronomer, standing on a mountaintop, charting the infinite cosmos. You are not. You are a prisoner, sitting on the floor of a cell, trying to guess the shape of the guards outside the door, based solely on the warped shadows slipping under the crack. Everything you think you know about the universe is tainted by the glass. If we could somehow remove the optical defect, if we could suddenly peer through the KBC anomaly without the localized redshift, the true, unvarnished universe might be entirely unrecognizable. The structures out there might not be the peaceful, slow-drifting spirals we imagine. If the external reality is actively reacting to the anomaly we live inside, its true appearance might be something the human visual cortex is simply not equipped to process. We assume the universe is beautiful because the anomaly softens the image. It blurs the edges. It hides the teeth. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. If the light is lying to us, what does the outside actually look like? Even our starlight is filtered through a lie. To find the truth, we had to look for the boundary, the place where the lie stops. We deploy the Extended Baryon Oscillation Spectroscopic Survey, or EBOS, to map the deepest geometries of the cosmos. We utilize the 5-meter wide-angle optical telescope at the Apache Point Observatory in New Mexico. We outfit this massive instrument with thousands of individual optical fibers. We drill precise holes into large aluminum plates, corresponding exactly to the known coordinates of distant galaxies and quasars. We manually plug a fiber into each hole. We channel the faint, ancient starlight down these fibers and into dual spectrographs housed in a temperature-controlled, sterile clean room. We cool the charge-coupled device detectors with liquid nitrogen to eliminate any thermal interference. We disperse the light into its constituent wavelengths. We measure the exact absorption lines of ionized gases. We use this staggering level of mechanical precision to map the baryon acoustic oscillations. We measure the frozen sound waves from the early universe. We do not just look at individual galaxies. We look at the absolute volume of space they occupy across vast cosmic epochs. We calculate a highly specific metric known as the isotropic BAO distance scale, mathematically denoted as the parameter A-ISO. We define this parameter as the ratio of the volume average distance we measure in our surveys to the theoretical sound horizon scale predicted by the cosmic microwave background. We use this exact mathematical ratio as a definitive structural test of the cosmos. In a perfectly uniform, homogeneous lambda CDM universe, this ratio must remain absolutely constant. It should be exactly 1 across all cosmological eras, regardless of how deep into the past we look or how far away we measure. To rigorously test this assumption, we divide the observable universe into strict redshift bins. We essentially slice the cosmos into massive, concentric, spherical shells centered on Earth, using the cosmological redshift parameter Z as a proxy for physical distance. we calculate the A-ISO parameter for each individual shell independently, ensuring the data from one epoch does not contaminate another. In February 2026, an exhaustive cosmological analysis of this specific parameter was uploaded to the Archive Scientific Repository, compiling decades of localized spectroscopic data. We scrutinized the numbers from the most immediate local volume. We examined the spherical shell directly surrounding our solar system, extending outward to a redshift of z equals 0, 15, which translates to a physical radius of approximately 1 billion light-years. The numbers within this shell were severely anomalous. In this local zone, the A-ISO parameter drops significantly below 1. It is mathematically depressed. The data rigidly confirmed a profound, localized underdensity and an artificially accelerated expansion rate of 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec. The local universe is undeniably, demonstrably hollow. But the critical discovery occurred when we pushed the analysis into the next spherical shell. We analyzed the light from galaxies just past the boundary. We crossed the mathematical threshold of z equals 0.15. We measured the isotropic distance scale at redshifts of 0.2, 0.3, and beyond. The data underwent a violent, immediate shift. The parameters abruptly normalized. The A-ISO value snapped back to exactly 1. The expansion rate dropped perfectly down to the background cosmic microwave constant of 67.4. We mapped the exact mathematical edge of the KBC void. We measured the precise perimeter of our local anomaly. We established the physical coordinates of the boundary line. The anomaly does not fade, it stops. The transition is sharp. It is mathematically sudden. The universe does not blend, it snaps. The distortion ends completely. The physical laws reset. The boundary is a hard line. Reality is divided. What that means is that the KBC void is not a gradual, natural fluctuation of cosmic dust. It is a heavily defined structure. It has an exact, measurable geometry with a strict stopping point. The edge of the void is not a soft gradient that slowly blends into the background of space. It is a sharp, statistical wall located exactly 1 billion light-years away from your front door in every direction. You cross that invisible line, and the universe instantly changes its fundamental behavior. Imagine a fish swimming in a massive, brightly lit aquarium in the middle of a dark house. For its entire life, it swims freely through the temperature-controlled water. It believes the water stretches on forever. It believes it is the absolute master of an infinite liquid domain. It charts the microcurrents from the filter. It catalogs every single synthetic pebble on the floor of the tank. It assumes its reality is boundless and universal. Then, one day, it swims a little too far to the left. Its snout violently impacts a perfectly smooth, completely invisible plane of solid glass. The fish stops. It hovers in the water. It stares through the transparent barrier. It sees the living room. It sees the dry air, the heavy furniture, the completely alien physics of a reality it can never survive in. It realizes, in a sudden flash of neurological terror, that its infinite ocean is just a glass box sitting on a table. We are that fish. For millennia, we have stared into the dark, assuming the cosmos was a boundless, continuous ocean of stars. We thought we could chart the currents forever, but the 2026 BAO redshift data just found the glass. The mathematical boundary at redshift 0.15 is not just a statistical coordinate on a graph. It is the physical wall of our tank. But when you look at the cosmological data at redshift 0.15, there is no gradient. There is no messy transition. There is a wall, a sudden, sharp, statistical cliff where the laws of physics abruptly change their behavior. In criminology, when you find a perfectly straight line separating a contaminated zone from a clean zone, you immediately know you are looking at artificial containment. A chemical spill seeps outward chaotically. But if you find a room where a highly toxic substance is perfectly contained within a flawless, geometric circle in the exact center of the floor, you know it was placed there. You know someone drew a perimeter. The sharpness of the boundary is absolute proof of intervention. It means there is a mechanism enforcing the separation. The KBC void has a perimeter. It is a spherical quarantine zone defined by an invisible mathematical membrane. Inside this membrane, space stretches at 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec. Inside this membrane, 20% of the universe is simply missing. Inside this membrane, every galaxy is violently accelerating outward. But the moment you cross that boundary, everything snaps back to the cold, uniform, high-density baseline of the cosmic microwave background. The suddenness of that transition should terrify you to your core. It implies that the void is not a localized accident. It is a sealed environment. Think about the sheer hubris of human ambition. We build massive rockets. We launch probes. We talk about becoming a multiplanetary species. We dream of one day harnessing antimatter and building faster-than-light engines to explore the deep cosmos. We look up at the night sky and we see a limitless frontier just waiting to be conquered by our technology. We think the only thing stopping us from touching the edge of the universe is time and engineering. But the boundary at redshift 0.15 is not an engineering problem. It is a localized prison wall built out of the fundamental forces of nature. Imagine you are an ant, born inside a highly sophisticated, pressurized terrarium in a laboratory. You can crawl across the synthetic dirt, you can climb the plastic leaves, you can explore every single millimeter of your environment. You think you are free. But if you ever manage to crawl up the glass and reach the exact edge of the enclosure, you cannot go any further. It is not because you lack the physical strength. It is because the environment outside the glass is a vacuum chamber. The moment you cross the threshold, the sudden, violent shift in atmospheric pressure will completely obliterate your biology. The terrarium is not just a habitat. It is the absolute limit of your structural integrity. We are trapped in the terrarium. If we ever manage to build a ship capable of traveling 1 billion light years, if we ever manage to approach the exact edge of the KBC anomaly, we will not sail gloriously into the infinite cosmos. We will hit the mathematical membrane. We will cross from a low-density, high-expansion quarantine zone into a high-density, low-expansion reality. We do not know if human physics can survive that transition. We do not know what happens to the atomic bonds of our machinery or the quantum coherence of our brains when the underlying fabric of space-time abruptly shifts its tension. The boundary wall might not be a physical object you crash into. It might be a threshold where the laws of thermodynamics violently rearrange themselves. Crossing it might be the cosmic equivalent of walking out of a pressurized submarine at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. You look at the stars tonight, and you need to understand that you are not looking at an open ocean. Every single star you can see with the naked eye, every constellation you have ever named, every nebula we have ever photographed in high resolution is trapped inside the tank with us. We are swimming in a perfectly spherical drop of localized physics, completely sealed off from the true reality of the cosmos by a mathematical perimeter. We are completely isolated, and a boundary that sharp, that perfectly spherical, enclosing a space this perfectly empty, forces you to confront the ultimate dread of the architect. It forces you to realize that our sector of the universe is highly structured. It is organized. The emptiness is maintained. The boundary is enforced. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. Why is there a neat, measurable line separating us from the rest of existence? The cage has a measurable radius. A boundary implies a structure, and a structure implies something that model builders have been terrified to admit. We model the macroscopic evolution of the universe using massive, highly complex computational frameworks. We call this the lambda cold dark matter model, or lambda CDM. It is the absolute, undisputed paradigm of modern cosmology. To test this model, we do not simply rely on theoretical equations. We build entire synthetic universes inside supercomputers. We utilize n-body simulations like the Millennium Run or the Illustris project. We input the precise initial conditions of the cosmos, derived directly from the thermal fluctuations of the cosmic microwave background. We program the exact measured ratio of invisible cold dark matter to visible baryonic matter. We apply the cosmological constant to simulate the repulsive force of dark energy. We set the simulation to run forward through 13.8 billion years of computational time. We watch the algorithms calculate the immense gravitational interactions of trillions of individual virtual particles. We observe the formation of the cosmic web. We watch gravity slowly pull matter together into dense, glowing nodes that become superclusters. We see the matter stretch into vast, interconnected filaments. We document the formation of the natural, irregular pockets of empty space between these filaments. We call these empty spaces voids. They are a perfectly expected, natural byproduct of gravitational clustering. We map their distribution. We use Gaussian random fields to predict the absolute mathematical limits of their size. We calculate the power spectrum of density fluctuations to establish the strict statistical boundaries of how large a natural void can grow. In a standard lambda CDM universe, the density variations on extremely large scales are tightly constrained. They are mathematically forbidden from exceeding a few fractions of a percent. In 2024, astrophysicist Moritz Hasselbauer and his international team published a rigorous, highly detailed statistical analysis in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. They compared the physical dimensions and the internal density of the KBC anomaly to the absolute mathematical limits of the standard cosmological model. They calculated the exact probability of a 2 billion light-year spherical underdensity forming through natural, unguided gravitational evolution. They ran the statistical models. They searched the simulated cosmic webs for any structure matching our extreme local environment. They quantified the exact statistical likelihood of finding a void of this staggering magnitude, missing 20% of its total mass, possessing a sharply defined perimeter, located anywhere within the observable universe. They established the physical parameters. They finalized the computation. The simulation found nothing. The probability is near zero. The math rejects it. It is a statistical impossibility. The standard model forbids it. Gravity cannot build it. Dark energy cannot clear it. Nature is chaotic. Nature leaves debris. The void is clean. The structure is perfect. The model is dead. What that means is that the emptiness surrounding our solar system is not a natural cosmological occurrence. It is an artificial excavation. We are taught to look at the universe as a wild, untamed wilderness, governed solely by blind, unthinking forces. We are comforted by the belief that everything we see, the galaxies, the nebulae, the vast expanses of dark space, is the result of random quantum fluctuations slowly magnified by gravity over eons. But randomness has a very specific, undeniable mathematical signature. Randomness is messy. It is inherently asymmetrical. It leaves jagged edges, uneven distributions, and chaotic transitions. The KBC anomaly does not possess the signature of randomness. It is a flawless, 2 billion light-year sphere of missing mass with a perfectly sharp mathematical boundary. It possesses the signature of intent. Think about the sheer scale of the statistical violation we are sitting inside. Imagine you are a seasoned explorer trekking through a dense, primeval rainforest. The environment is aggressively chaotic. The trees grow wildly in every direction, fighting a brutal, million-year war for sunlight. The vines tangle across the canopy in unpredictable fractal patterns. The ground is thick with centuries of fallen leaves, rotting logs, and dense, impenetrable underbrush. You document the chaotic biology. You understand the brutal, unguided laws of the jungle. It is wild, but it makes logical sense. But then, you push through a thick wall of ferns, and you stop dead in your tracks. You are standing at the exact edge of a perfectly circular clearing. The clearing is exactly 2 kilometers in diameter. The ground inside the circle is completely bare. It has been scraped down to the raw, sterile bedrock. There is not a single blade of grass. There are no stumps left behind. There are no uprooted trees pushed to the side to indicate a storm or a natural disaster. The transition from the incredibly dense, chaotic jungle to the absolute, barren circle is a razor-sharp line. Now, take that exact psychological horror and scale it up to the largest structures in the observable universe. The lambda cold dark matter model is the fundamental rulebook of the cosmic jungle. It perfectly dictates how the dark matter vines grow and how the galactic canopy spreads. It allows for natural, chaotic voids to form between the overlapping branches of the cosmic web. But the mathematics of the standard model absolutely do not allow for the KBC anomaly. To generate a perfectly spherical void 2 billion light-years across, missing 20% of its total structural mass through random quantum fluctuations, is functionally impossible. It would require the primordial density of the universe to have been inexplicably, flawlessly hollowed out in this exact, specific coordinate location before the first stars ever ignited. Nature does not excavate perfect spheres. Nature does not maintain pristine, empty quarantine zones. If the void is statistically impossible under the natural, unguided laws of physics, then we must abandon the ultimate comfort of human philosophy. We must abandon the idea of an indifferent universe. We have always assumed the cosmos is indifferent to our existence. Indifference is terrifying, but it is also profoundly safe. An indifferent rock rolling down a mountain might crush you, but it isn't aiming for you. An indifferent universe might be freezing, dark, and irradiated, but it is fundamentally passive. It is a blind machine grinding forward, but a universe that possesses massive, geometric structures that violently violate its own statistical laws is not passive, it is active. If the KBC void cannot exist through natural gravitational evolution, then the natural laws of gravity are not the highest authority in our sector of space. Something else is dictating the architecture of our local reality, something possessing a structural capacity that completely dwarfs the combined energetic output of 1 trillion galaxies. We are forced to confront the dread of the architect. To create a void of this magnitude, you have to actively suppress the natural clustering of matter. You have to actively repel the galaxies. You have to forcefully push the dark matter scaffolding to the perimeter to create a heavily fortified buffer zone. We are sitting inside an artificially sculpted pocket of reality. It means the emptiness surrounding our solar system was cultivated. The mass was either harvested or it was systematically evacuated to establish a perimeter. Why do you establish a 2 billion light-year perimeter? You do it to create an absolute dead zone. You do it to ensure that no signals can cross the divide. You do it to ensure that whatever is trapped inside the center of the void has absolutely no neighboring star systems to interact with, no resources to harvest, and no stepping stones to use for interstellar expansion. We have spent the last 60 years pointing radio telescopes at the sky, desperately searching for the faint, anomalous signals of extraterrestrial intelligence. We looked for the thermal waste of Dyson spheres. We listened for the mathematical repetition of artificial beacons. We were looking for campfires in the dark. We completely failed to notice that the entire forest around us had been systematically logged and cleared, specifically to ensure that we would never find any wood to burn. We are not failing to find aliens because they do not exist. We are failing to find them because the physical medium required for them to exist near us was deliberately removed from the premises. The emptiness of the night sky is not a passive canvas. It is a highly engineered structural barrier. Every time you look at the black space between the stars, you are looking at the mathematical precision of an active containment field. It is a statistical anomaly that requires a terrifying amount of energy to maintain. The universe is not messy and chaotic in our neighborhood. It is clinically, unnervingly clean. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. If nature didn't clear this space, what did? The anomaly is too perfect to be an accident. Which brings us to the final piece of data. The exact coordinates of where we are inside this anomaly. We calculate the radial density profile of the anomaly. We measure the luminosity function of galaxies in concentric spheres radiating outward from Earth. We count the number of luminous red galaxies and active galactic nuclei per cubic megaparsec. We track the exact rate at which the mass density increases as we push our measurements closer to the redshift 0.15 boundary line. The void is not a perfectly uniform vacuum. It operates as a massive, three-dimensional gravitational basin. The outer boundary consists of dense walls of compressed matter. From that boundary, the density drops precipitously as you move inward. The nadir of this basin represents the absolute point of minimum cosmological density. It is the core of the underdensity. In the initial 2013 data compiled by Keenan, Barger, and Cowie, and strictly corroborated by the comprehensive 2024 density models, we mapped the exact coordinates of this central nadir. The Milky Way, the Andromeda Galaxy, and our entire local group are not drifting randomly near the outer edges of this structure. We are located within a few 100 million light-years of the absolute geometric core. Within a spherical anomaly 2 billion light-years in diameter, we are sitting directly on the target coordinate. We are not at the edge. We are not passing through. We are at the epicenter, the exact focal point, the absolute bottom of the well. The void is centered on us. The coordinates are exact. What that means is that the emptiness of the KBC anomaly is not a random weather pattern that our solar system just happened to wander into. It is a structure oriented entirely around our specific location. If the void was a natural accident formed by the chaotic expansion of the early universe, the statistical probability of the Milky Way being located at the exact, deepest geometric core of a 2 billion light-year anomaly is functionally indistinguishable from zero. We are not simply tourists driving through a barren desert. We are the exact mathematical reason the desert exists in the first place. Think about the horrifying gravity of that realization. You were taught in every astronomy textbook that the universe does not revolve around you. You were taught the Copernican principle, which states that Earth is an insignificant speck of dust occupying a completely unremarkable coordinate in an indifferent cosmos. But the macroscopic, gravitational topography of the KBC void completely contradicts that assumption. The massive, high-density walls of matter, located 1 billion light-years away, are perfectly equidistant from our position in every direction. The violent outflow velocities tearing the local galaxies apart are radiating outward from our exact coordinates. The physical structure of our local reality is undeniably, mathematically centered on our solar system. We are at the center of our observable universe, but it is not a center of glory, importance, or divine creation. It is the center of an exclusion zone. Imagine you wake up in an unfamiliar, windowless room. The walls are smooth, cold steel. The air is completely sterile. You look around, trying to determine the nature of your confinement. You look at the center of the floor, and you see that a heavy, red line has been painted in a perfect circle around the chair you are sitting in. Every object in the room, the tables, the medical equipment, the lights, has been pushed aggressively against the far walls, leaving you entirely isolated in the absolute center of the empty space. You realize immediately that the room wasn't just left empty by accident. The room was prepared. The environment was meticulously arranged to ensure that you, specifically, could not reach anything. And nothing could reach you. The KBC void is that sterile room. The high-density walls of the normal universe are the equipment pushed to the far edges, and we are sitting in the chair at the exact center of the red circle. The emptiness surrounding us is not a passive feature of the cosmos. It is a heavily maintained buffer zone. The universe did not clear a 2 billion light-year sphere of matter to give us a safe place to evolve. It cleared the space to maximize the physical distance between us and the rest of reality. Now look at the precise physical parameters of the KBC anomaly. The massive 2 billion light-year underdensity is the sterile buffer zone, stripped of 20% of its structural mass. The high-density walls at redshift 0.15 are the reinforced concrete containment shell, and the localized expansion rate, the violent 73 km per second outflow of galaxies tearing away from our coordinates, is the negative pressure system. It is a kinematic mechanism perfectly designed to ensure that absolutely nothing from the absolute core can ever drift outward and infect the healthy tissue of the surrounding cosmos. We look at our history and we call ourselves explorers. We look at our rockets and we call ourselves pioneers. We are completely blind to our own nature. We are an aggressive, consuming anomaly. We weaponize the fundamental forces of nature. We split the atom to build weapons of mass annihilation, before we build reactors. We alter the chemical composition of our own host planet until it suffocates. If our specific, localized physical laws are a thermodynamic mutation, a virulent deviation from the cosmic microwave baseline, then we are a localized cancer of spacetime. If we were allowed to cross the boundary, if our localized physics were allowed to leak into the pristine, uniform reality of the normal universe, we would corrupt the baseline. We would metastasize. The architects of the void, whether they are an incomprehensibly advanced intelligence or simply the automatic, structural immune system of the universe itself, understood this threat. They identified the localized error occurring exactly at our coordinates. They recognized the mutation, and they aggressively excised the surrounding tissue. They surgically removed the galaxies. They drew a hard, mathematical perimeter. You have spent your entire life believing you are the protagonist of the cosmos. You believe the stars are your birthright. You believe the universe is a vast, open frontier just waiting for human consciousness to expand into it. You stare through the heavily calibrated lenses of our space telescopes. You look at the distant, distorted light of the boundary walls, and you think you are looking out of the window of a grand, cosmic mansion. But you need to look much closer at the architecture of your environment. Imagine waking up in a dark, perfectly sterile room. You do not remember how you got there. You stand up from the cold floor. You walk toward the heavy, reinforced steel door. You run your hands over the smooth metal surface, searching for a latch. You search for a handle. There is nothing. The surface is completely flush. You press your ear against the cold steel, and you hear the terrifying, heavy mechanical deadbolts clicking into place on the other side. The lock is on the outside. A space this empty, this mathematically precise, with our planet sitting exactly at the absolute geometric core, does not happen by random gravitational drift. The void is an architecture of absolute exclusion. The universe is not a theater built for your entertainment. It is a hospital. And our localized physics, our very existence, is a virulent thermodynamic anomaly that the rest of reality is actively trying to suppress. Every time you look up at the night sky, you are not seeing a welcoming infinity. You are seeing the absolute limits of your quarantine. You are seeing the warning signs posted on the outside of your containment cell, written in the language of missing mass and localized redshift. You are looking at the barricade. So ask yourself a very quiet, very uncomfortable question. Are we observing the universe, or has the universe quarantined a disease? You are not a spectator. You are the pathogen. It is terrifying to realize you are not the center of a thriving cosmic empire, but the pathogen locked inside a localized defect. It is horrifying to know that the laws of physics you trust are just the biology of your cage, and that the cosmos outside is completely incompatible with your existence. But fear is a privilege. It means you have something to lose. A dead rock floating in a sterile void is not terrified of the boundary wall. You are. You are terrified because you are the anomaly that survived the purge. If the universe truly cleared out a 2 billion light-year sphere of matter just to contain us, then humanity is a consequential force in this sector of reality. The cosmos is not an indifferent, peaceful ocean. It is a violent, engineered quarantine. And the fact that you exist at the very core of this exclusion zone, breathing, thinking, and building telescopes to look at the heavy steel lock on your own door is a mathematical miracle. A terrifying, hostile universe is infinitely more beautiful than a safe, boring one. It means your existence requires effort. It means you matter enough to be locked away. So, tell me in the comments, what do you think is actually waiting for us on the outside of redshift 0.15? Assuming the containment field holds until tomorrow, I will see you in the next video. You can click the playlist on your screen to explore the other structural defects of our reality. Sleep tight. The game is still on.